Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelava, and this is Mayan Speedplay number 3. We left off really close to being able to pass a religious reform. We also have our Aztec vassals, who I'm not sure if they will stay our vassals after we reform or not. We also go ahead and just make our estates slightly more happy with us, and there is probably going to be a revolt sometime in the next few moments, which just occurs. We build up 3 groups of mercenaries, attach them to our army, and hope really hard that we finally have enough troops to win a battle against those rebels, which it looks as though we do, which is quite nice. So with that all said and done, we can probably just safely move our armies back, speed the game up a little bit as we just have a bit of sitting to do, and with all that sitting complete, we can go ahead and pass a religious reform. We go ahead and look over our options, but pick not to colonize or to lower core costs, but instead to lower revolt risk by 2%. Since we always seem to get one rebel every time we take over an area, hopefully this will just slow the process down enough that we'll be able to pass reforms without having to fight rebels. We also lose cores on 2 of our provinces, which is a little odd, but not too much. With that all said and done, we're still allied to this northern country and the far westernmost country, which is maybe not the greatest alliance block, but still a decent one. We go ahead and just zoom through the next 5 years as we just have truces and whatnot. Our far western ally, Kolyma, is fighting a bunch of people. We had given them quite a bit of land so that they would hopefully create a little bit of their own empire. It looks as though they're actually going pretty hard in doing that. They also appear to have allied our other ally, and they're just fighting a huge trio of states. However that goes doesn't really matter too much to us, so long as we still get Zapotec and the Tealish country, which interestingly didn't used to be there at all, but conquered one territory, and I guess that's now theirs. At any rate, though, we do just kind of watch what happens with not really bated breath, but a little concerned, as all this foreign empire building while we're forced to sit is a little bit worrying, just in a general sense. And they do end up calling us to arms, though, so we may as well come and help them. We do go ahead and just start funding our military, as anyone would do before being called to war, and just kind of shove our force over there. We have a large enough army we can just win, and we do. And then we just split up and start sieging various things. We also get an event which just makes us shuffle around the loyalty of our estates a little bit. We pick poorly, and now our merchants hate us, but we'll deal with that in good time. We also don't have a convenient way to just increase their loyalty, which is somewhat unfortunate. At any rate, the sieging continues, and there are some enemy armies around. It looks as though they're just going to go off to our east. Hopefully an ally army will go and take care of that, as I really don't feel like it, and speaking of, it looks as though they are going to go and do that for us, which is quite nice. Or really for themselves, because it's their war. At any rate, though, we also go ahead and grant a territory to our merchant classes. We do lose a stability, which is kind of sad. We go ahead and just raise it by 2, since really, before the Europeans show up, all of our admin points are incredibly cheap. All of our points. We only really need to invest in military technologies, and that's just to stay ahead of everyone else around us. Hopefully we manage to time our completion of religious reforms before any Europeans show up. That's going to be the big worrying thing. Kolyma did end up vassalizing, I think, a state or 2, which is slightly worrying, and we may end up having to deal with that later on. However, it looks as though they just got doom. So they lost their empire, which is just ridiculously convenient. And before any of you ask, yes, this is Iron Man, which is in part why it's auto-saving so frequently. So yeah, no foul play on my part. They just lost their empire as soon as they built it. Which honestly is pretty cool. We can also probably declare war on Zapotec in just a moment, as well as that small country just to their side. And once we manage to do this, pull this whole thing off, we will be able to pass another religious reform with relative ease and really quite quickly. It seems as though it's just the first religious reform which is difficult to get past, and after that things kind of just fall into place. I mean, knock on wood, because we don't actually quite know if that's going to happen yet, but at this point it seems as though we shouldn't be tempting fate, but we do have it kind of figured out at this point. Which means if we can just keep this up for a little while, we might be ready when the Europeans come. We are now just sieging places out, so we'll probably speed things up in a moment, although it looks as though there might be some events abroad. The Aztec are at war again, which is never really refreshing. We go ahead and just speed up for a moment as the sieges finish, and we go ahead and just annex their country and take quite a bit of ducats, something like 148. Which I feel is a lot more than I would get if I controlled the province, although maybe that's just because I would increase spending and never see the just gain. We do go ahead and continue the southern siege. We don't really have much we can do at the moment, since we do have long truces with basically everybody. We instead decide to support the independence of our northern allies' vassal, which is kind of a very rude move to do to our northern ally, who's been our consistent ally for quite some time now. However, if we don't want to wait something like 10 years for our truce with the Aztec or Mixta to end, then they're really going to be the ones we have to advance into if we want to get anywhere. And it's a bit sad, but hopefully we'll be able to do it fairly soon. And speaking of, they managed to just declare their independence war, which is great. There's nothing worse than waiting eagerly for a country to declare an independence war while you just kind of sit there. We don't have to worry about that. We just march up. They didn't even move into the capital, which means we'll siege out their capital, giving us just the lion's share of war score, meaning that we will be able to probably just enforce our peace deal, which is to siege, or not to siege, to acquire the single territory we have already occupied. Once that's done, we're just going to sit back, core it, reform our religion, lose a bunch of provinces, rinse and repeat. You see they are managing to deal with whatever various armies are still in the area, which is nice for them. We are just kind of waiting around at this moment for the siege to complete, although there are enemy armies moving about, so it's not just static. And they are unsieging some of the areas we've sieged, quite rudely, I might add. We do go ahead and just join and unsiege. I realize if we had let them unsiege the province, destroyed their army, then sieged it again, we would take control over it. However, most of the war score is going to come from the capital, and we do control the capital. It's just the difference of how much gold we could probably have gotten from them, and it looks like we won't get very much. But we do get some amount, and we are able to religiously reform after this war, so it's all fairly good. Not too much. We do get a culture accepted, but that's probably going to go away in just a few moments once we give it the opportunity to. We reform our alliance with Kalima, and actually even with the country whose vassal we supported the independence of. They just are totally down to forgive us. And in about a few years, they won't even have the modifier for us owning one of their cores, because we're just going to give that up. We do end up getting a rebellion, though, so we do the same thing as last time, raise 3 mercenaries, all attach them together, charge into the province headlong, and that does seem to do the trick. We've definitely been fighting against rebels a lot better now that we have 10% increased combat efficiency for our infantry, which is really all of our armies for basically forever. And yeah, everything seems to be going pretty alright. We go ahead and move our forces back to finish all these corings and whatnot, and just kind of let the game go forward, since not all that much is happening, and I don't think you'll really miss anything. We do go ahead and reform our religion just once more, this time I believe getting us colonists, so we go ahead and get ready to just begin colonizing. We set up the repression focus, that gives us plus 20 colonial growth, because let's be honest, we're only really going to be focusing on colonization when we don't have any foreign monsters to hunt. So our military will always be more or less in position to just do whatever needs being done. We also only lost Zapotec, which is very nice. We're losing slightly less countries every time we reform, which is really just a nice trend to be in. And we only need to reform 2 more times before we're essentially done and just have to wait for a western neighbor or get up to 18 techs. You'll notice as we speed up that Zapotec did get attacked. They're now a vassal of the Aztec. And unfortunately for Mixtec, they were invading them, and now have to kind of just deal with that. We deal with some native revolts, just end them, and rush over. We do not have a truce with the Aztec, so the plan is to just declare war on them, march in, take all those provinces very early, and we might even be able to get our religious reform done super quickly. Unfortunately, we do still have a truce with Zapotec, and we don't actually have a casus belli on the Aztec, which kind of means that that was a bit of a moot point and just kind of a false start. So we go back to just kind of sitting during the 5-year truce. Even worse is we killed all the natives, so we don't even get any native boosts. We do get a call to arms, though, so we go ahead and just say that we want these 5 provinces and attack. We join in the call to arms, we build up our army a little bit. Probably should have done that before accepting the call to arms, but, you know, what have you, slight mistakes. We go ahead and just move our forces over, and sadly we do have an allied force just kind of sitting on the fort that we need, which is a little worrying. However, we can just march on over to Mexico and siege their actual legit full capital of the Aztec, not really empire. And we'll just kind of see how that goes. They do move away from the Zapotec capital, so we send a sieging force down there. And with that all said and done, it's just going to be a bit of sieges for a while, so we speed through that. Come back, and they do finish their siege of our allies' capital. Interesting that they're still our ally, but I'm really not going to worry too much about that. It was very, very lucky of us that they were forgiving. And now that giant Aztec and allied army just kind of roves around a bit, and it looks as though they're just going to start unsieging all the work we've done. Unfortunately, they're heading straight for our sieging force. We luckily finished the siege of Mexico just in time, and we managed to get there with probably only a day or so to spare, win the battle, and continue our siege. Our allied army goes and attacks them and just kind of dies, which is a little bit sad. They still have a 3-star general, and they actually do get stack wiped, which is less than particularly optimal for this war. And it does look, however, as though we don't even need to siege their vassal capital. We can probably just go ahead and get a lot of demands from them. So we do that. Interestingly enough, their vassal army turns rebellious, and they end up having to fight their own vassal's army since they became nationalist rebels, which is very nice for us. We can just go ahead and reform our religion, which is really something that I thought we would have to wait longer for. We kind of sold our allies under the bus, although we've been doing that fairly consistently for a while now. So it isn't really all that terrible. We even get a new heir who we just kind of let name what they're named, with a slight variation, of course. And now we wait for just a moment. We need 2 religious reforms to be passed, and then we'll be essentially just completely golden. And we'll actually be able to conquer the entire region we're in instead of just waiting. We go ahead and speed through this coring process. Unfortunately, I actually went real-world AFK for this time, and you'll see this call to arms. I actually did not see that call to arms, since I was AFK thinking nothing would happen for the brief moment. So I come back, realize that we lost our Western Alliance. If this was earlier in the game, then that would have been a terrible, terrible misstep. However, if it was earlier in the game, I also wouldn't have just left and went AFK for a moment. You will notice, though, that I did get back just in time for the coring to finish, so we do pass a religious reform, and that was just one for 10% cheaper army costs, in case you missed it. Now we just have to wait another about 5 years, go ahead and declare war on the Zapotec again. We unfortunately lose our old heir, getting ourselves a new and younger heir, who we don't get to name, which is slightly sad, but not much you can do about that. We do just continue to zoom on through to the other side. It'll be a little bit of this. We come back with our truce nearly over. We did manage to go through quite a few years. Sadly, though, we die. Now we have a regency council for a very young, very, very young child, and we're going to have to wait for quite some time in a 12-year regency before we can actually declare any wars. Our allies can still call us to wars, but we lost some of our major allies, so we do a bit of shuffling around our alliance block. And we can still colonize and hopefully get up to 20 cities that way. Other than that, though, that's basically it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. I might just skip ahead to the end of the regency if nothing happens.